In my presentation, I will talk about a previously unknown version of a Buddhist text found in the old Japanese manuscript collections and introduce two examples of such scriptures. But before that, I'd like to give you a brief explanation of the background to this research. The old Japanese manuscripts have been highly valued as cultural assets, but they have not been given much importance as a text source in Buddhist studies. However, Professor Toshinori Ochiai's discovery of some interesting Buddhist texts in the manuscript collections led him to the broader realization that old Japanese manuscripts are important not only as cultural assets, but also as textual resources for Buddhist studies. Specifically, he found that the Nanatsudera manuscript collection contains many important texts, including a newly discovered version, such as the biography of the Bodhisattva Ashibagosha. This manuscript version differs significantly in content from the text of Kumara Jiva's translation in the Taisho edition. Against this backdrop, Professor Ochiai initiated a research project into old Japanese manuscript collections in 2005, which was supported by grant of the government. Unfortunately, grant support ended in 2014, but the investigation and research have continued to this day. As far as I'm concerned, it's been 20 years since I took part in this project. The monasteries primarily investigated as follows, as you see. Firstly, the Kongoji Monastery, located in Osaka, has many manuscripts that were mostly copied in the 13th century during Kamakura period. The number of extant manuscript scrolls is over 4,000. Secondly, the Nanatsudera Monastery is located in Nagoya, and its manuscripts were copied in the late 12th century. This collection is also of over 4,000 scrolls. Lastly, the Koshoji Monastery is located in Kyoto, and its manuscript collection also dates back to the late 12th century. Apart from these three, there are some other monasteries possessing manuscript collections, but the collections of the above three have been the primary focuses of our investigation and research so far. Here, let me show you a couple of photographs of the temples. This is the Kongoji temple. You can see the red building in the background of this picture. That is the temple's main hall. And this is the repository of the Kongoji temple, where all the manuscripts and other precious items, such as the old Buddha and Bodhisattva statues, are preserved here. This is a photograph of the inside of the repository in the Nanatsudera Monastery. These boxes, this box, these boxes are a container for storing manuscripts. These boxes were also made in the 12th century, so this is very precious. And this picture shows the process of taking manuscripts out of the container as the investigation. The manuscript scrolls are stored within the container like this. As we have seen, we have those old manuscript collections. Then a question arises here. What is the origin of these old manuscript collections? What were the source texts of them? On what material were these manuscript collections based? Given that printed editions already existed in the 12th and 13th century, it cannot be ruled out that these manuscripts were copied from such printed editions. However, the likelihood of this is extremely low. Although I do not explain this in detail at present, to put it simply, the primary sources for these manuscript collections can be traced back to manuscript collections created as far back as the 8th century, namely the Nara period that we call. For example, several manuscript collections were produced during the Nara period. Among them, the manuscript collection created by the order of Empress Komyo was regarded as the most authoritative. Thank you. The manuscript collections, such as the Kongoji's manuscript collection, are not direct copies of such imperial manuscript collection, but they can be traced back to it in terms of textual lineage or textual stemma. So the next question is, what are the source texts of the Nara period manuscript collections? The answer is manuscripts copied mainly in China during the Tang Dynasty and brought to Japan. These overseas manuscripts clearly formed the basis for the creation of the Nara period manuscript collection. Next here, I will briefly touch on the printed editions. As you know, today, the Taisho canon is recognized and used as the standard text worldwide. Many scriptures in the Taisho canon are based on the second Koryo woodbrick printed edition. Besides, in the footnotes of the Taisho canon, we can see variant readings of other printed editions like this. Here, like this. Usually, they are collated with Song edition, Yuan edition, Ming edition, and so forth. Now, I'd like to pick up two such scriptures I have examined so far. One is the Five Kings Sutra, which exists only Chinese translation with no Sanskrit or Tibetan translation available. Furthermore, the translator's name remains unknown, and the date of translation is also unclear. According to the catalogue of scriptures, this is thought to have been translated during the Eastern Jin dynasty, that is in the 4th century to the early 5th century. In this scripture, 5 kings bound by deep friendship listened to the Buddha's teaching on the truth of suffering, dukkha satya, and then all of them renounced their thrones to become monks. For them, the Buddha taught the dukkha satya, more specifically, 8 kinds of sufferings in details. The beginning of this sutra in the Taisho canon is shown in this photo. So far, I have examined 2 manuscripts of this scripture, that is the Kongoji manuscript and the Nanatsudera manuscript. Their opening parts look like this, as you see. When I first glanced at the opening sections, I thought both versions were identical. But when I looked more closely, I realized they were actually different. Specifically, there are 3 differences between the 2 versions. The first difference is the sequence order of 8 kinds of suffering. The first 4 sufferings, namely birth, aging, illness, and death, are common to both versions, but the sequence of the latter 3 sufferings differs, as indicated by the blue, yellow, and green. Secondly, some of the translated terms differ. For example, among the sufferings cited in the first difference, the suffering of separation from loved ones has different translations, as shown here in blue color markers. And I'd like to take up another notable example. That is the translation of the Sanskrit term slaughter arpanna or slaughter arpatti. The printed version uses both the old and the new terms, but the manuscript version uses the old term alone. It is quite normal to keep translation consistent in one scripture, so this example shows that the printed version is unusual or strange. The third difference lies in the brevity or details of sentences in the same paragraph. In other words, the difference is about how short or long sentences are in the same paragraph. When it comes to the total number of characters, letters in the whole scriptures, the printed version has about 310 more characters than the manuscript version. If we convert 310 characters to the format of an old manuscript, then that will be roughly 18 lines. As this is tiny scripture, so 18 lines is a considerable amount when viewed relatively. In particular, the printed version provides a more detailed explanation of sorrow, grief, and suffering. In contrast, the manuscript version just explains this a little more simply. As we can see, even though there are 3 points of difference, both versions have lots of identical sentences, which shows that they are closely related. As for the relationship between these 2 versions, there are 2 possibilities. One is to assume that the manuscript version was composed by deleting some sentences from the printed version. Another possibility is quite the opposite. Namely, The printed version was composed by adding some sentences to the manuscript version. I don't explain in detail here now, but internal textual evidence suggests that the second possibility is more likely. So it seems more likely that the manuscript version is the original, and the printed version is a text that has been edited at some stage. As a second example, I'd like to introduce an example of a manuscript version that differs entirely from the standard printed version. That is the manuscript of the Chinese version of the Samanta Bhagavad Pranidhana that was translated by Amoga Vajra in the 8th century. This is very popular Mahayana scripture circulated across much of Asia. In this scripture, the Bodhisattva makes a promise to do the 10 kinds of good deeds, Bhadracharyas, such as paying homage to all the Buddhas, and so forth. This vow is expressed in a series of stanzas. The beginning part of the Taisho canon is shown like this. As you see, the title is at the beginning, and after that, the name of the translator, Amoga Vajra, is shown in the 4 lines, and then the stanza start like this. As far as this scripture is concerned, the Nanatsudera manuscript and the Koshoji manuscript are the same as the printed version, but the Kongoji manuscript is extremely special and unique. This is a photograph of the beginning of the Kongoji manuscript. And this is a photograph of the end of the manuscript. This manuscript is completely different from Amoga Vajra's translation. Now, I'd like to point out 4 characteristics for the time being. The first line has the same title as Amoga Vajra's translation, as shown by the red-lined box, but the rest portions differ significantly. At first glance, it cannot be considered the same scripture. This hitherto unknown manuscript text is comprised entirely of phonetic transcription of the original Sanskrit in Chinese characters. This is the first characteristic. Here, in order to see how much different both versions are, let's look at the first stanza of Amoga Vajra's translation. The first stanza like this. The first line, in the world of the 10 directions. Second line, before the lions among men, that is Buddhas, in the 3 period. Third line, now I pay homage to them all without leaving anyone out. The fourth line, with a body, speech, and mind that are completely pure. As you see, the stanzas have been translated into Chinese to convey their meaning, and this is actual translation. Next, let's have a look at second line of the Kongoji manuscript, as shown by yellow line. That might be a little hard to see. This is obviously a transcription of the Sanskrit phrase Namaha Samanta Badolaya. Please have a look at the letters after that, as indicated by orange lined box. This is actually a phonetic transcription of the first quarter of the first stanza in Sanskrit, which is equivalent to Yavata Kechi Dashat Dishi Loke in the Sanskrit original. The second characteristic is this. Each quarter verse is serially numbered with Chinese numeral. The initial salutation to Samantabhadra, as seen just before, is counted as 1. So, in fact, the quarter verse of the first stanza, A pada of the verse, is assigned the number 2, as you see here in yellow marker. At the end of the manuscript, we see the number 57, that is the last serial number. As you see, it as red-lined box. Ending with 57 is also the characteristic, in my opinion. Apart from the initial salutation, which is counted as 1, the text comprises 56 transcribed quarter verses. One stanza consists of 4 quarter verses. As there are 56 quarter verses in total, this text amounts to 14 stanzas in total. In other words, this text ends at the 14th stanza. However, Amoghavajra's translation comprises 62 stanzas, in fact. How should we consider this? Why is this not a complete phonetic transcription of the Sanskrit original? The 14th stanza is by no means a section that can be divided in terms of contents or meaning. So right now, I have no idea why it stops abruptly at the 14th stanza, to be perfectly honest. Talking about extant Sanskrit sources of this scripture, they can be divided into 2 branches, that is, northern and southern sources. I do not state it in detail here, but the Kongoj transcription corresponds to the southern Sanskrit source. And Amoghavajra's translation was also based on the southern source. So, this might be because the phonetic transcription text has the same title as Amoghavajra's translation, in my opinion. So, in this presentation, I have talked about hitherto unknown versions of Buddhist texts in the old Japanese manuscript collections, and then introduced 2 examples of such scriptures. So that's all I have to say today. Thank you very much for your kind attention.